Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the next Creativeside chat here in the Chuck Jones Gallery during ComicCon. As you can see, I have wings and I am flying high. Well, no, this is actually Spider-Man behind me. And so today is all about Marvel, but we will get to our guest artist, Tim Rogerson, in just a little bit. But I wanted to say welcome. Thank you all for being here. And I'm lucky enough today to be flanked by like Spider-Man people and Hulk people. And I think the greatest superhero though out here right now is Ari Goldman, who I've only known for 25 years. And, you know, well, he's over here in my side, but I don't know where he is for you guys. But he's been a buddy for a very long time. And we've spent way too many hours together enjoying our time in New York and elsewhere. Comic-Con is usually a great time to get together. So welcome, Ari, to the Chuck Jones Gallery virtual edition Comic-Con this year.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with everybody. I'm actually seeing myself and how big my hair is. This is coronavirus hair, so excuse the gruffiness and the size.
My hair that big, I definitely would. If I could, I definitely would. But yeah, no, you look great. I love the scruff as well. You got that going on. I know it's a whole different look for you. So
thank you.
I take it you're hanging out in New York at the headquarters of Marvel all the time, right out there. Is that correct?
Actually, no. I'm out in California, and most of Marvel's headquarters, although publishing for Marvel still in New York, which is their graphic novels and comic books that are current, the studios and the licensing portion of what we specialize in is actually out here in Burbank, California.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you are you're the head of the art publishing division of Marvel Comics, which is quite a wonderful thing. You've been doing that for a number of years, and I know that we have worked in the art world for, you know, literally 23, 24 years now together. And it was brilliant of you to decide that this was an endeavor that you wanted to get into. What was the inspiration of, you know, you taking Marvel by the horns and saying, you know what, I want to cultivate this part of this world for you?
It was a bit of a journey and a fascinating one, at least for me. We were always active sort of, let's see, we were always actively going to comic book conventions, but we were very focused, which has to do with sort of the DNA of our company, on original animation. And obviously that's how you and I know each other. Craig, you and I know each other from decades back when my passion was animation. We found that comic book conventions was a very, very natural segue into meeting collectors that loved comic books and then superheroes. And from superheroes, which were like the Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 70s and 80s that I grew up with, and Hanna produced Marvel cartoons, DC cartoons, and of course their own cartoons, we found a lot of collectors that crossed over from both universes, from animation into superheroes. And we start to sell more and more superhero art, but no one out there in terms of prior licensees was really doing a good job covering Marvel. Ruth Clampett was doing a great job and always has on DC and Batman, Superman, that whole universe. And Marvel, we felt, was sort of underutilized.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I will say I love the DC characters, but I think I have always gravitated toward these Marvel, you know, the Marvel universe. You know, Spider-Man and the Hulk are probably my favorites personally. So was there a particular character that drew you in to Marvel to say, you know what, and I'll briefly, my mother met Ted Turner one time and said, you know, at the Emmys, and she introduced herself and said, you know, I'm the daughter of Chuck Jones, and you know, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and he, in his loud booming voice, said, How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Gone with the Wind. That's why I bought MGM. So literally, he said, those are the two properties why I bought MGM. And so, was there something like that where you said, I need to be able to work with that character?
The first Iron Man movie, with Robert Downey Jr. That came out, I fell in love with that character at that time. I didn't realize how much I appreciated the Marvel universe of characters until then. And in particular, it was, the genius billionaire playboy. I thought was quite a character. And I also loved, which, not that I'm going back to DC, but I loved the idea that he actually didn't have any superpowers. His superpower was he's a genius, and he was capable of using his resources to create, this Iron Man, which is really a costume, just like Batman is a costume that has all these great toys.
Right.
That's what Iron Man was, and I just like the character, so that really turned me on. It was Iron Man, the first movie.
Well, I got to say, as you were describing Iron Man, sort of that super intellectual playboy, I just thought, it's you. I mean,
thank you for the compliment, but I'm definitely not accepting it. I appreciate it.
Where are those jet boots when you need them?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, how about this? Where are the billions when you need them?
There it is. They're cluttered and strewn around us. It's just our job to go find them. So
yes.
Yeah, no, I love that movie. Love the character, both on and off. Robert Downey Jr. is such a guy who seems to play the great hero, but has challenges. And in life, he seems to have played that same character. So it's great to see that personified. And, and then Spider-Man. I mean, I don't think there's any character that is more personified or associated with Stan Lee. And, I mean, Stan did a number of events at our gallery down in San Diego during ComicCon over the years and whatnot. But you ended up getting to know Stan well, or at least at a number of occasions throughout your time, both during and before. How was it the first time you met him?
It was, meeting Stan and working with Stan. I worked with Stan for almost 10 years. And meeting him for the first time was very intimidating. But Stan, in true Stan form, was always very, very easy to get to know. He was always very unassuming and appreciative of the attention and the sort of notoriety that he had amongst fans. So he was a sensational, really a highlight of my life outside of like the birth of my two daughters, was meeting Stan and working with Stan for 10 years. And I have like so many great stories. I asked Stan one time about Iron Man. And I said, Stan, I know that there's this long history of your characters that have the first letter of their first name the same as the first letter in the last name. And he said, yeah, that's true. I said, Peter Parker, the alter ego of Spider-Man, and Reed Richards is Captain Fantastic, and Bruce Banner was the Hulk, and so on. And I said, Stan, how come what's with the first letter, last letter thing? And I thought he had some kind of really sensational system. And he said, Ari, reality is I created so many characters, it just became easier for me to remember them if the names started with the same letters. So that was his explanation for what I thought was this grand scheme of like coordination. And then I said, listen, Stan, my favorite character is Iron Man. So what happened? Tony Stark it's not within your system. And he looked at me straight in the eyes and he said, my damn brother named him.
No,
Yep.
The only one. Well, you know what? There is obviously a big, a good history with that. And I was going to ask you, sort of similarities between Chuck and Stan, but you got Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Porky Pig. So that alliteration seems to be a very well-known. It's a memorable thing, because if it were Bugs Rabbit, who would care?
Right.
You got to get that in there.
It's very snappy.
Yeah. So tell me about it must have been fun to pick his brain about his characters and the history, but he enjoyed life a lot. I mean, he enjoyed being around people, maybe not overly gregarious, but he seemed like he enjoyed being part of this world, this universe, and Earth. So, I mean, you were around him so much in both social situations. Were there any things that sort of kind of creep out when I asked the question of, what was he outside of this, Marvel universe?
He was very much what you're describing. Stan always had nice things to say about everybody, and he was always thoughtful and considerate, hardworking, and he really enjoyed his life. And he particularly, which was always very touching to me, is like we would be doing things together, and he would always be looking and saying, well, he'd be looking at his watch and saying, I promised Joni I'd be home by 4 o'clock. And no matter what we were doing, he was always like, I'm 15 minutes away from home. I've got to leave here at 20 up to make sure I'm on time. I promise I'll be home. So he was incredibly devoted to his family and his daughter, JC, and his wife, Joni. And that always was very memorable. And also, he was always very actively engaging. And if he was bored, sometimes he might get a little bit bored when he would be signing artwork for us. And then he would start reciting poetry. Like literally out of the blue, he would start reciting poetry just by memory. And that was Stan. His mind, you could tell it was a mind of a genius, because it was never sort of wasting time. Even if he was sitting there, he was using it, reciting poetry. He would talk about movies. He loved Errol Flynn. He originally told me he originally wanted to be an actor, and that's one of the reasons why he wanted to come out to California. And that was Stan. It was like, he was the person that really could have done or been anything. And he became this amazing legend, but it really was based on his creativity. And he was just, though, that same guy that could have recited lines and been a great stage actor or a film actor, and he was handsome and he was charming, and he was really all the things that one would think he was, and gracious.
And so, and there's so many similarities there with Chuck, and I'm just curious, one of the things that we've distilled down over time, unique elements about Chuck and really the Chuck Jones Center for Creativity being that personification, at least in name for sure, of that creative genius. And you talk about Stan's creativity and his genius in there. Did he ever talk about, or did you overhear him talk about where ideas came from, or where his creativity came from, or anything like that?
I hope everybody's not bothered. There's I think a police car passing by. Sorry about that if you hear it. Nothing wrong over here. There was definitely glimmers of inspiration. I used to ask him things. So, for example, I once said to him, Stan, because we haven't discussed it, but the origin of the characters all comes from comic books, right? And he oversaw and wrote the stories for all the comic books. And I asked Stan, I said, Stan, the Incredible Hulk, #1 comic book, the Hulk is gray. So he said, yeah, it was gray. I said, well, how come it stopped being gray? Like, where did the gray come from? He said, well, when I first envisioned the Hulk, he wasn't really a villain and he wasn't really a hero. I wasn't totally sure what he would be, but I thought gray was sort of like in between. So I made him gray. When I got the first copy of the comic book from the publisher, I saw that the gray was inconsistent. Somehow the inks were not actually adhering to the pages or printing on the pages with consistency. So he said to the publisher, what color could you get me that I always could be assured the color will be consistent? And the publisher said green. So the Incredible Hulk became green. Now, how does that all relate? That's kind of a fascinating story, that the first comic he's gray and then he becomes green on a simple fluke where he just needed a color that was consistent, where we would all think there must have been something more, like maybe he was green with envy or green with power, or there was some weird, I don't know, relationship with green. It wasn't. It was a consistent color that could be used. But then I said, what's a gamma ray? Where did you get the inspiration? He got caught by a gamma ray and enabled him to become the Hulk, Bruce Banner. And he said, Ari, a gamma ray just sounds scientific to me. So I called it a gamma ray. So my inspiration sort of just comes from whatever his knowledge was as he grew up around things around him. He thought, well, a gamma ray, I'll just make that the reason why the Hulk was able to change. So his inspiration, I think, was inconsistent. It was all part of his life. And the theme of part of his life was kind of another interesting story about Stan, because he always said to me that he never understood, for example, why Bob Kane put Batman in in Gotham, and why Superman was in Metropolis. He said, I put Spider-Man in New York City. I put the Fantastic Four in New York City. I put Stark Tower in New York City. And he did that, he said, because why create a city when you already know a city and there's cities that everybody kind of knows and can relate to? So that's why Stan always used cities that he knew. And he also made all of his characters flawed, because he said himself and all the people he knew had character flaws. So why make a superhero without any character flaws? So therefore they're all flawed. They're all human like us in terms of their emotions, trials and tribulations of living their lives.
I think that is the real reason that we can all, we hope to be one of these characters. We hope to be Tony Stark, who is fallible, who does make mistakes, who obviously we want to be victorious in the end. But that's a really good observation. I think it's, I used to hear Chuck talk about Bugs Bunny. He was always the hero, but it wasn't always easy, and he certainly was not an antagonist that went out to look for things. So those inconsistencies and those challenges in us, as he said, he always dreamt of being Bugs Bunny, but he looked in the mirror and he saw Daffy Duck. So I mean, and that we all have that inside of us. But there's something so great about the superhero universes these days. I mean, the comic books are awesome because it allowed our imagination to take what he did and then bring it to life. And now, with the advent of looking back into the early years of like Superman and the television shows in the 50s and 60s and that time frame, it was very different to what is going on now. And really, it's interesting to see animation now become the basis of all the superhero movies, that really without all of the animation that was done. So your obvious passion for animation and the history of that now being absolutely portrayed in all of these great Marvel masterpiece movies they have to be at least 50% or more animation. So you're right back in the same business that you were before, just you have live action, characters that are overlaid on top of them.
Yeah, I totally agree. The DNA is in animation, because animation goes all the way back to the way storytelling began. And, and I think it always made sense to me how quickly illustrative art, like the comic book art, translated over. So Superman was, the inception of Superman was Action Comics 1. It was 1939. Very, very quickly thereafter, maybe a year or two later, with the success of Superman, Fleischer was producing Superman cartoons. And it just makes total sense, the transition from one to the other. So the DNA is all there.
Yeah. Well, I am interested in when you started with Marvel Art World, because and I can't remember what the URL is. It has all the wonderful things. I think it's probably be in the chat session in a second. I know I've got great people around, so they're going to throw it into the chat session here. So I don't want to make sure that we remember that. But I got one behind me, and Ben's got one behind him, and some of the things that these artists are creating over and above what Stan did and a few of the other creators had done. It's kind of like now our homage artists that are taking Chuck's characters and creating new vibrant works of art and bringing themselves into it. How did you start? Who did you pick? How did you start cultivating the art world of Marvel 10 years ago?
It's a really fascinating thing that you just brought that up, and I'm so glad you did, because when I first got into it, the first person that inspired me, I must say, to love current interpretive Marvel art was actually Alex Ross. And he was the first time I saw this sort of human, emotional, very much photorealistic imagery of the characters that had been a little bit more campy, let's say, prior to that. And then we started to expand the universe into people that I knew, people, which we'll get to, Tim Rogerson, who were creatively taking the characters and interpreting them. And I basically was looking around for people that loved Marvel. So it was important to me to find people, and I'm going to use Tim Rogerson because he's going to be live. Tim loves Marvel, and Tim's creatively a genius, and he'll disagree with that, but he is. And so when I got involved in the publishing of the fine art, Tim mentioned to me straight away, he said, Ari, you know, I love Marvel. I would love to do some of that. So the people with whom I've been working on Marvel fine art are all people, first and foremost, who are passionate and fans of Marvel characters, Marvel stories. And then from there, if they care, then I know that they're going to use their sort of creative energies to come up with beautiful interpretive art that is emblematic of the characters and how they feel about them. So that's kind of where I started. And I do want to mention something really important. It happened at almost every signing with Stan that when we weren't signing, for example, classic covers, you know, reprints of classic covers, you know, he would look at art in front of him and he would often stop. And on every signing, he would stop and he would look up at me and he would say, wow, Ari, this is beautiful. And sometimes say, do you think I could get a copy of this? I'd love to have this. He was always fascinated by how new artists were interpreting his characters. He often said, he's like, I couldn't have imagined Iron Man like this. I couldn't have imagined the Hulk like this. The expression, the energy, the emotion that comes out in some of the images that we've published. He was, may rest in peace, he was absolutely baffled and blown away by the creativity of what the artist did with his characters.
I think that is the best part of some of these creators, and Chuck was the same way, that he so enjoyed seeing what others would do as well. And it was that humility, and you talked about it before with Stan, that, you know, the humility and the overwhelming fawning that would happen for Stan or Chuck or all of these greats that did this. And I think it wasn't the norm that they had that innate humility of just being like, you know, that's too much, you know, thank you, but look at this, look at that. And he always was more interested in talking about what you were doing or what you know, what the other artists were doing, and heaping praise on others. And I think that is a unique quality that I think shines through when true genius and true greatness is in an individual like Stan or Chuck and these small instances. But it's great to hear you talk about those sort of you know, experiences, because and you knew Chuck. I mean, you met Chuck and spent time around him. Did you, when you first got to know Stan, were there ever times that you kind of flashed on that you know, you had this experience before you met Stan of knowing Chuck for a number of years and spending time with him, similarities or that type of thing?
Yeah, the humility always struck me as amazing, and I've often, when people have asked me about my times with Stan and experiences that they've had with other people who are not nearly as creative, not nearly as sort of important in our lives in terms of the lives of pop culture and things that have touched people, who don't have even a shred of the humility that, for example, Chuck had and that Stan had. So
yeah,
the similarity is incredible, where these two people, these two creatives, are legendary and are so important in all of our lives and touch us in so many different ways. If you think of how they touch us and how we grew up and how they touch our lives today in film and in books. And by way of example, you know, just a tiny bit off the topic, I was looking at Chuck Amok the other day and I saw that the opening prologue was written by Steven Spielberg. So
yeah.
I read it like I hadn't looked at it for a long time, and it happened to be here in the office, and I thought, let me just take a look at that. And I read the opening prologue that's written by Steven Spielberg about Chuck Jones, and he basically said that it was Chuck Jones who inspired him to, as he quoted, fly on my dreams.
Right.
And these two guys, if you can imagine the billions of people that have sort of flown on the dreams of each of them as great directors, as people that inspired them. And I just, it's very hard to sort of crystallize it, but they both very much had similar kind of characteristics about them, Chuck Jones and Stan Lee. Those are the two that I've met. I spent a little more time with Stan, but the similarities are absolute.
Well, that warms my heart to think that each of those inspirations, and to go back, and I have a copy of Chuck-a-Muck right over here, and I always reference it. And an interesting thing about Chuck-a-Muck, and I know Ben does this, and I've heard it from many artists, that they, in fact, I was in Disney a couple of years ago, and with Ben, as a matter of fact, and Ben, you got to help me with the name.
Byron Howard.
Byron Howard. Yeah, we bumped Byron Howard on a junket through Disney, and there on the shelf, because we talked and I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, well, Chuck was inspires me every day," and he held up a Mark Anthony and Kitty mug every day, and he goes, "Yeah, I mean, I've got Chuck-a-Muck." And Chuck was one of the only guys, I wrote to everybody because I didn't go to a traditional animation school, and and I wrote to everybody in Hollywood, and Ollie Johnston and Chuck Jones were the only ones that wrote back to me and said,
Wow.
and said, come on down, and my daughter Linda will meet with you, and let's get together and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, "I have Chuck-a-Muck and Chuck Redux right on the bookshelf over here." And he walked over and he grabs Chuck-a-Muck, and he pulls it out, and he opens the book right in front of us. And there is the letter from Chuck from 1990 sitting in there, and he unrolls the darn thing.
Wow.
That is the inspiration that got me into animation, the encouragement that Chuck did. And he had the damn letter sitting right there. So anytime that you can find Chuck-a-Muck, go look in it, because there's going to be something cool in there. So for me, I look in when I need to answer a question. I just open the book and read what's ever there. And I'm just like, oh, it either lifted my spirit or it gave me some inspiration or something like that. So I'm glad you got Chuck-a-Muck hanging around.
I literally can see it. I don't want to get up out of the photo, but I have it literally right there. And I just read that prologue the other day, and I went through the whole book, and it's very inspirational. And I'm just I feel blessed that I spent all that time with Stan, but your blessing is totally like otherworldly, that you grew up as Chuck's grandson. It's like,
it is kind
everybody can envy that quite openly.
I know, and I often, everybody asks, you can draw, right? And I said, well, I do stick figures really well. I didn't do those 100,000 bad drawings that I needed to do to get them out of me for everybody's benefit. So, but speaking of drawings and putting in all the hard work, I wanted to see if we might bring Tim Rogerson in, and I know that there's some technical things to actually, because I'm looking to see if we can bring Tim. Hey, look, I see Tim now. I see a picture of Tim. He's going to unmute and put his spotlight video. So Ari, why don't you introduce, while they're working out the details of the technical, and introduce Tim and bring him in, and I'm going to bring in Ben Olson, because any guy that wears, hey, there's Tim. Hi, Tim. Can you hear us?
Game day.
Ah!
Look at that.
I know. It's game day.
We're in here. And then Ben, you're over there. You got the Hulk and all these other great things around. And anybody who wears a Spider-Man outfit to the Zoom gets to be front and center. So that is awesome. So now we've got a quad here. So an odd quad for sure. But Tim, it looks like you're hanging out in your studio. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is my studio in Celebration, Florida, where it's about 120 degrees outside today. It's
great.
Florida in summertime, very hot.
Nice. So, Ari, why don't you introduce and talk a little bit about how you connected with Tim and what that's been like, and then let's hear from Tim as well. But I wanted you to kind of have a chance to set this up because I love Tim. We've gone back for the time that we first met. But go ahead, Ari. I just want you to kind of be able to fawn over him a little bit, and have him reject it all.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, well, I met Tim many, many years ago, actually, at a Disney event, and I was immediately taken with him as a person. And I always like to, when people ask me about working with people, I mentioned before that people, whenever we work with artists, obviously we want somebody who's passionate and cares about the subject matter. And I also believe that if you like to collect a certain artist, that if you meet the artist and he's a very, or she is a very special person, then that really adds to it. Because when you meet Tim Rogerson, as soon as I met him, I immediately was like, I gravitated towards him because I just felt like I had nice rhythm, and he's one of the nicest people in the world. Tim has become, over the last 15 or 17 years, one of my very best friends. He's always about 5 steps ahead of me. Like, he sent me an image of Thanos, and I said, "Who's Thanos?" And he's like, "Seriously? How do you not know Thanos?" And it happens all the time. He's like, here's a image of the new image of Spider-Man Homecoming. And I'm like, "What's Spider-Man Homecoming?" He's always 5 steps ahead of me, and he always has inspirational things to talk about. And what is, besides his creativity, besides him personally, who he is, and as a person, he's also a absolute student of art and art history. So a student of art history kind of means to me that not only does he care about art and he likes to create art and he cares exactly about every piece that he does, but he studies all, for example, the Impressionist and Post-Impressionist. And Tim loves the Impressionists. So when he and I were talking about him doing new Marvel art, we talked about Impressionism. And of course, the first person that popped up was Picasso. And everybody kind of, not everybody, but many people are familiar with the Cubist movement. And Tim said, "Well, let me take a shot at doing some Marvel characters in a Cubist fashion." And I thought to myself, who even could think of such a thing? Like, who could figure that out? I know I can't, because Craig, if you draw stick figures, and I can't even draw stick figures, but Tim, if you leave it to Tim, he comes up with it. And so, Tim became a very dear friend of mine, a confidant of mine. We talk all the time. And he's been an inspiration for me, because every time I come across a place where I can't figure out what we should do next, he comes up with a new way to put it together. And that's Tim Rogerson. He's an incredible talent. And actually, I'm thrilled that he was available to do this. So without any more fawning, and he can push it all away, all of it's true, and I'm going to stop talking.
Oh, you're too kind, Ari. You're too kind. What's up, everybody? Hope you're all doing well and you're all in good health. And welcome to ComicCon. I've been going to ComicCon for, I think, 8 years now. So this is my first time doing it from home. And to tell you guys a little bit about myself, I'm a Disney fine artist. Started my career about 16 years ago. And how I got the job with Disney Fine Art was I was going to art school at the Ringling School of Art and Design down in Sarasota, Florida. And I worked for Disney on the weekends while I was going to school. Had a sweet part-time job behind a register in a gallery. And I would stare at James Coleman paintings all day and watch the fireworks and the parades every night. It was a pretty sweet little gig. And one day we had a signing with Ralph Kent, who is it's a big deal. He's a Disney legend. He worked with Walt Disney himself, was brought over to Florida to help design the park. And so we had a signing with him in the gallery. And I told him I was going to art school and wanted to work for him, one day in the future. And he puts me on the spot and asked me to draw Mickey for him, and that he can tell everything about an artist by the way they draw Mickey. So the pressure was on. I can remember seeing my hand was shaking, and I drew Mickey for Ralph Kent, and it was like muscle memory. I've been drawing this Mickey since I was about 4 years old, and I've been practicing for this drawing pretty much all my life. And still to this day, it's one of the best Mickeys I ever drew. And he hired me right there, and I got my first job as a Disney character artist for Walt Disney World. And so I did that for 3 years, finished art school, and the goal was always animation. That was always my dream job as a kid. But in 2004, when I graduated, the unthinkable happened, and 2D animation was shut down. So when that opportunity, closed its door, Michael Young with Disney Fine Art walked through the front door of the gallery and gave me a shot to kind of try out for Disney Fine Art and see if I had a good fit. And most of the other artists were they were amazing landscape painters. You want to cry, the landscapes are so beautiful. And the characters are always way far off in the distance. But me, I was completely different. I was a character artist, so my characters were huge and larger than life, and maybe one day there'd be a background. But mostly it was character art. So it was a perfect fit for the portfolio with Disney Fine Art. And it's been an amazing 16 years journey ever since. I've got to be the official artist for the Winter Olympics, the very first D23 Expo back in 2009, which really changed my life. I've been playing catch up ever since. I've been official artist for Disneyland's 60th anniversary and Mickey Mouse 90th last year. And it's been an amazing journey. And probably one of the coolest things that has come from Disney Fine Art is getting to meet all these amazing people and traveling the world. And that's how I got in touch with Ari. And when he had the Marvel license, I think I called him up probably 4 times a day, letting him know that I love Marvel too, and that I would love to paint and see what would happen. And you can kind of see some of my work behind Craig and Ben. But Cubism was kind of this style that I was doing with Disney that was taken off. And I just did a painting of Breaking Bad, Walter White, and I had done this, it was like a periodic table abstract cube painting. It's kind of hard to explain, but it was basically abstraction of squares. And then I would paint Breaking Bad on top of that abstract painting, which came out really cool. And I thought I'd try that with the Marvel characters. So instead of the periodic table as the panels, it was the actual panels of a comic book, because that's how you tell a story in the comic world. And so I would create these abstract paintings of squares and then draw the characters on top of those squares. And then each square kind of influenced how I would paint the character. And they all kind of fit together like a puzzle. And they create these really interesting images. And I wasn't quite sure because it was so different and I wasn't sure how people would react to it. But my first event with Marvel was with Stan Lee. I got to meet one of my heroes. My 3 heroes in life is Walt Disney, Chuck Jones, and Stan Lee. And unfortunately, I never met Walt, and I didn't get to meet Chuck, unfortunately. But I did get to meet Stan Lee. Yeah, that image is actually that day of that event.
Wow.
And he saw these 4 paintings, and he said the hardest part of an artist is to be original. And he's seen 1,000 paintings of the Hulk, but he had never seen the Hulk painted in that way. And told me congratulations, and that meant the world to me. So I knew that was the right track to move forward. And I've been painting like crazy ever since the last, I think, 5 years. Maybe I think I started with Ari, maybe 6 years.
Tim, I think even a bit longer than that.
Is it really? Gosh, time flies.
It is a beautiful
when you're painting your characters.
It is a beautiful collaboration, and I wanted to bring another artist in, because then he can talk art with you, which I can talk stick figures and I can talk stones, but for someone to understand what you do, and because Chuck would look at somebody's art, and if he really appreciated it, he'd say, you can paint your ass off, is what he'd say. And and I know that is what he'd say when he would see your work, because I've been a fan since 2004 from that first Disney event that we met way back when. And so that's as technical as I get when it comes to painting, is you paint your ass off. But I figure that Ben Olsen could come in as one of your brethren, who you know very well and have spent lots of time with, to come in and ask you, and because he's not just a fan of your artwork, he's a huge fan of Marvel. So Ben, yeah, Spidey.
So I want to say that I own this piece, and I watched as Tim was painting the black and white version first at C2E2, and
Chicago.
I was like, dang, man. I'm like, first of all, you're in my neighborhood. And you were at Choice Collectibles and you were doing this piece. And I saw the black and white and I'm like, I would buy the black and white. And you're like, wait till you see the color. And I did. And I'm like, and purchase. So we were at an event and I had to have it because I love the way that you mashed the characters together. And I'm a huge Marvel fan. I remember my first comic book in 6th grade. It was Spider-Man. I still have it. Deadliest Foes. Right. And I remember being inspired by a lot of guys. And at that time, you know, like Jim Lee and John Romita Jr. and all those guys were coming up. So there was a lot there. But I remember what you were doing and the work that you were putting in. And I already knew the Disney fine art that you were doing. So I knew that style. And what I loved is what you brought to this. So this hangs in my studio. And I think you saw it last year when you were here in December, along with a whole bunch of other pieces that I have here. So what I want to say, too, real quick, is he kind of like glossed it a little bit. You were the last guy that Ralph Kent really brought under his wing. Is that not true?
Yeah, it's kind of a huge honor. He was like my Mr. Miyagi, you know. Instead of wax on, wax off, my first day I drew 10,000 circles, and I still got blisters on my fingers.
Yeah,
but it was awesome. I trained with him for 2 months. His office was the 2nd floor of the animation building, and they were working on Lilo and Stitch at the time. So I always take the long way around the studio and kind of take a sneak peek. But every day was this crazy, you know, lesson. And these are lessons that he learned from the 9 Old Men, like way back in the day. So, you know, Ollie Johnson used to make people draw 10,000 circles back in the day. So it was kind of cool to be a part of that Disney history. And yeah, he retired right after he trained me. And we had a big ceremony. He had his name put on the window above the cinema on Main Street, which is the biggest honor you can get at Disney, is to have your own name on the window. And so, yeah, so it's a big responsibility to paint good work. And
I was going to say, man, like the pressure is all on. He basically says, Tim Rogerson was my last, drop the mic, walk out. And he's like, make something of it.
Yeah, I think about him all the time.
Which is awesome. And then 2, you know, you kind of glossed over a little bit. You're like, yeah, I kind of did the Olympics thing, but let's not be coy with that. You were the youngest ever to do artwork. Yeah. Hold on a second. Ari's got a 4-month-old and a 2-year-old. I have a 2-year-old who's trying to get something out of my cup. So you were the youngest, what, 23? Yeah.
I was the youngest ever special artist for the Winter Olympics. And I was with Peter Max, who's a fine art legend. And Alfred Gockel.
Yep.
And me.
So I just wanted to give you all a little context of, like, Tim's like, I kind of did some stuff and it was cool and whatnot. But no, there's a little more significance than that. So, you know, as you get into, you know, you're a big Degas fan. I'm a big Monet fan. I love that impressionist spirit. I love what you kind of bring to the work. In how we got a bunch of kids on too that are watching this, and they're really into this whole, like, how do I be this artist? Like, what do I have to do? And I remember when I was young and I wanted to get into animation, because while you and I got into the same school, I could not afford the bill to do it. So
I'm still paying the bill.
But what I love about, you know, what you pull off is it's not just this, like, it's not, you're just doing the cartoon character. So as Ari said, what you're putting into it, you're a student of art. What is it that you bring into that fine art aspect when you're practicing to get better? Like, I was always told fundamentals. So what is it that you work on in those fundamentals to get better at what you do?
I think the best example is Picasso. You know Picasso for his abstract cubism pieces, but if you see his work when he was 15 years old, he was a realistic artist. So you have to learn the basics before you can abstract it. So with the characters, I try to draw the characters as accurately as possible, just like you would see in the comics or the films. And then I try to figure out how to not just draw Mickey, but draw my version of Mickey. As if you walk into a gallery and there's 100 paintings of Mickey, how can you make it look like that piece looks like it's your Mickey, and make it different from everybody else? And it's a challenge. And the only way to get there is you got to draw, and then draw some more. And so, yeah, absolutely. I love studying all the artists, to kind of see what it is I like about that work. And then sometimes I'll do master copies where I'll copy that painting and try to figure out how they did that piece, and then see if that influences my own personal work. And I'm always learning. I'm always finding new artists that I haven't learned before, and going to museums and And actually, my last trip to see you in Chicago, they had the big Andy Warhol exhibit at the Art Institute, and that, oh man, I'm still painting artwork inspired from that show. So it's just it's just keeping up with what's out there, being inspired, and then putting in the work and creating as much work as you can. So there's no secret button. You just got to put in the time.
It's just putting the time in.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, to kind of piggyback. And first of all, if Scott, if you can put up, you've got to go as we're watching this, maybe you're on another device, so you can pop another window in as we're talking with Tim, but go to chuckjonescatalog.com/Marvel. I own that piece. You should all own this piece because it is the baddest piece ever. And you saw this black and white, and that's always how I started painting, because color is a beast of its own. So I try to get the drawing and the values perfect before I start adding color. So that's what I wanted to ask you next.
This piece looked pretty cool in black and white. It was hard to put color on it.
No, it didn't look pretty cool. It looked like the baddest thing I'd ever seen. And color, you blew it away with the color, but man, like the black and white too. So that's what I wanted to ask you, is your process to go through things. So I remember the first time I went and I saw Chuck Close at the Contemporary, right? And I saw that dude's paintings and, photorealism. And then when he got into kind of that different abstract, kind of style, but even in the color realism, and he would go through yellow and then red, right? And he would add that, but he would start in these black and white pieces in some cases.
Right.
What is it that you love when you get into that black and white, when you're finding the values and that you find, are you working through your kind of your lighting and your composition, or how is that coming about? Why do you start black and white?
Well, it's an old technique. Da Vinci used to start with like a sepia tone painting. And so it's the same kind of thing. All the old masters would start off with a colorized sketch in a way, and then just gradually glaze color on top of that. So for me, it's all about the drawing first. So I work usually black and white. Sometimes I work maybe browns and white, and just get the drawing just right and all the values and the composition's perfect. And then at the end, it's just color. All I have to worry about is the color at the end, because color is a beast. I mean, it can make or break a painting. So I want to have absolute concentration on just the colors and not trying to get the drawing right and everything. So it's just a process that's worked for me since art school. But sometimes the black and white looks so cool.
Dude, and
it's hard to put color.
Well, and what was it? And what I want to do is, Scott, could you put up the one that I own? Could you put up the one that I own that I have in the background right now? We have a paper edition of this on chuckjonescatalog.com / I'm telling you, buy it. Just hit the purchase button, because it's a wicked piece to have to your collection. So we have a paper edition of this that we're premiering tonight. But you talk about the black and white. You were with Ari, and it wasn't last year. I want to say it was the year before, maybe 2018.
Yeah, the C2E2.
Yeah, and was it Wolverine?
It all dates together. Yes, I did an Old Man Logan.
And it's black and white, and I'm like, stop it. It was so good. Like, and that's what I've loved about what you've done in your Marvel work. Because like I said, I'm a huge Marvel fan. I've grown up with the comic books. I love the films, and I love what you've done in bringing this completely different style, right? That grabs people. Every time somebody comes into the studio and they see your piece up there, they're like, how did he do that? I'm like, I don't know, but it just looks awesome, and you need to go buy one. So there's such a different appeal to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge. I'm a fine artist. I'm not a comic book artist or an animation artist. My job to me is to take that, interpret it for, the gallery walls, for your home, at home, so it's a whole different mindset so instead of having, animation, you get a whole sequence of time. But for me, I have one image to tell the whole story. It's a whole different mindset, painting fine art from doing comic book art. So
can I chime in, guys?
Yes.
Can I chime in for a moment?
Absolutely.
All right, you're here.
here I am. I just want to mention that as I've been watching the different imagery coming up on my screen, I want to mention that we had Tim Rogerson do that the quad that has the 4 Avengers, and it's on paper, and it's a 20 by 30 piece. And quite candidly, there it is. Well, quite candidly, we had forgotten that we had Tim do this, and he remarks each one of them. He hand signs each one of them. It's on archival paper, of course, And those were the first best individual Avenger Picasso Cubist style pieces that he did. And we created a print out of it, a limited edition out of it. And we forgot we did it. And I actually asked Tim twice. I said, do you remember why we did this? He goes, I remember doing it. I remember when I signed it and remarked each one of them. I don't remember why we did it. And when I moved from our one California office into a newer office, we found these in our flat files. So they're sort of like literally out of the vault. And Tim just did 20 of them, and that's all we have. And so I just want to mention that sort of like as an additional point of interest. It's a really beautiful item. It exemplifies Tim's interpretive Cubist style, and I believe it's quite reasonably priced. So I want to sort of highlight it as a unique thing. It's never been offered by anyone ever before besides the Chuck Jones team and the LJE Gallery. So I just want to sort of shine a light on it because it's such a unique and special opportunity, and it exemplifies everything that we've been talking about this entire chat.
What is the Hulk that Stan Lee kept talking about?
Catalog, Marvel.
So let me ask you, well, and first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but if someone purchases a limited edition, you might do a little handiwork.
Yeah, actually, I was doing one while Ari was talking.
There we go. Come on now. Yes.
What?
Come on.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, and let me tell you,
while he's not even focused.
Right? That's his doodle on a meeting call, like when we were in class. And I've got Tim Rogerson sketches of like that. I freaking love these drawings and what you put into it. So if you, and Ari, am I
here's
correct?
drawing. And it's on the acting paper too. So
Tim has agreed to do anyone that orders any of the limited editions that are exclusively available right now, particularly like the one we just showed. Tim has been extremely gracious, and sort of in commemoration that we're all not together at San Diego Comic-Con this year, Tim will actually give an individual drawing, each one's one of a kind, but something similar to what he just showed, which is the Spider-Man, to everyone that buys a limited edition today. So it's sort of a fun opportunity for somebody that paid attention, who is a fan, to get something special, because from time to time, if Tim happened to have been at the LJE Gallery, in the Gaslamp District at San Diego Comic-Con, and he was sitting at a table, he would certainly have agreed to do a drawing. So we thought, let's do that. Let's make that offer today. And Tim was kind enough to agree to do so. So everyone has the opportunity to, whichever piece you buy, he'll do that drawing that comes in conjunction with the piece.
So
which I think is awesome.
So this one, Ari, is part of that? This is the one you just talked about, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely, Craig.
You said there were only 20, right?
That's it, 20 pieces.
Now there's 19, because it's mine. Serious. Scott,
okay.
Write that down, take it off the list, because this is mine, and whatever, Tim, you end up doing for me, yep, you got me. I'm done.
Awesome.
I got jealous.
So Tim, I'm wondering, man, because I know you're always doing stuff, right? And I'm going to double down on what Ari said, because you were out at our Red Dot Chicago, which was a fundraising thing that we did because we're big on spreading arts to our community. And you came out with Trevor Carlton and Daniel Killen and RC, and you guys did a phenomenal thing. And then we had like a dual night, and there was Tim sketching away on the backs of canvases that people were purchasing limited editions on, and it was awesome. But you're always working on something. So I'm wondering, Tim, if maybe there's like a sneak peek at maybe something. I don't know. And I'm not, maybe there's nothing, but maybe there's something.
Ari, can I show concepts that I'm working on? What do you think?
With the extreme caveat that we don't have visibility on approvals from consumer products at Marvel, which we need. But I know that there's a big movie coming out, and I know that you worked up something, and I think it's fair enough to have a special offer of your drawing with pieces, and it's also fair enough to get a little sneak peek.
All right, that sounds good.
Thank you, Ari.
Let me see. I can share my screen here. I think. Let me see if this works. Here we go. There we go.
What?
So, can you guys see that? So this is a concept drawing for the new Black Widow film. It was supposed to come out already, but it got pushed back, I think, to November.
Serious?
But this is the Black Widow battle against the Taskmaster. It was amazing.
Oof.
And went with like a red color scheme, and then had the electric blue from the weapons in the suit that just reflects up in Taskmaster's face. I mean, it's gonna be really cool colors.
And you've got her symbol in there in the. Shut up, man.
Yeah, yeah. I love the logo, so I'm trying to use it as much as I can.
So
and, I love the hair too.
And you know what I love about it, dude, is my favorite hair of Black Widow is Iron Man 2, right? When she gets introduced. I don't think they got it better after that. I think that was the hair. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, so we're still waiting for approval. It might change to the white suit, which she wears in the film. But, you know, I'll have to ask them for me to watch the film ahead of time so I can actually draw it correctly.
So let me ask you that.
We'll see if that works.
And now, as an artist who has to submit these things, right, for approvals, and you go through stuff, all right, so let's say they come back and you got to change it to white. What do you paint over the existing painting? Do you paint a new one? How do you work with changes once you come out with something like this?
No, this is a digital concept I did on my iPad with the Apple Pencil, and I keep it like this until it's approved. Because I work with oils, you know, which takes a long time to dry, and you can't really like paint over it once it's there. So I want to make sure I have the image perfect before I start with the first, you know, brush stroke of color on the real canvas. So this will stay as a concept till it's, you know, completely approved.
Yeah, well, Tim Rogerson for the win, because that's ridiculous. Well,
it's pretty cool.
You know, I have. Do you find yourself as you're getting into like something where like, man, like I've seen your work from all the way back in the beginning, right? And you and I had a conversation when we were out in Chicago, and you know, we had a piece up, and I want to say it was Lady and the Tramp, right? And you're like, dude, it was so long ago, like it's changed. And I'm like, well, yeah, you grow, you know, right? You grow as an artist.
Yeah.
So is there something as you're getting because that Black Widow piece is a little bit different, you know, from some other stuff. How are you finding your evolution at this point?
So that's a great question, Ben. When I first started, it was all about interpretive art, right? It was all about cubism and how can I put my own stamp on the Marvel characters. And then Stan Lee passed away, and I had to create a piece to commemorate him, you know, which is impossible to do. Here, maybe I can show you that image too.
Yes, please.
So that cubism wouldn't have worked. You wouldn't have got the feeling that I wanted you to feel when you saw the painting. So this is it's called Nuff Said.
Oh.
And this is just a very classic, traditional image of these amazing characters that Stan created. And Ari, I believe we have these available still too, right? Is it sold out yet, or?
Hold on, Ari's out of his seat at the moment, but let's go.
Okay.
Let's go with.
Yeah,
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, I believe this is still available for purchase. But yeah, so this kind of started a whole new way of painting the characters because it really captures the heart in a way that Cubism, you know, had a hard time getting to. So, so this kind of changed my new direction that I'm going to be moving forward this next year, which is kind of a mix of both classic and Cubism, where the drawings are classic, but the actual painting approach will be a little more contemporary, which is kind of hard to see until you see the finished painting of Black Widow. But you'll see like floating brush strokes that break up the outlines, and it's going to look really cool when it's all done. But yeah, but this painting here, this is the one that kind of changed my Marvel style into this new direction I'm moving towards right now. So
I keep finding little Easter eggs or like little things. Like I didn't even see Ant-Man before.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I got Amazing Fantasy #1, and good stuff.
So when you're like, let's go back to like what kind of inspired you in the Marvel thing. What, like, I know where I was in Marvel when I was a kid. What is it that got you into Marvel when you were a kid?
So I grew up in a small town, Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and we didn't have any comic book stores, but we had comics at the grocery store. And I remember picking up my first Spider-Man comic, and it was the artwork was by Mark Bagley, who also went to Ringling, which is kind of cool. And I just fell in love with that character because he was in high school, you know, and he was just a normal kid like all of us, and but he was also a superhero, you know, and I related to that character. And in the second grade, actually, I was sleeping one night, and a spider landed on my eye while I was sleeping, and I blinked, and the spider bit my eyelid, and I had a swollen eyelid for about a week, and I had to wear an eye patch and everything. So I always wish I turned into Spider-Man, for real, but I never did. But I've always had a connection with that character, and then later on, I started reading, you know, more comics like a lot of DC, like The Dark Knight Returns and things like that.
Yes.
And kind of saw a whole different modern take on these characters. And I read a lot of X-Men growing up and Spider-Man. I never read Iron Man or the Hulk or Thor. But when the films came out, I was like, whoa, these characters are amazing. So I've gone back and read a lot of the Iron Man books and such, just to kind of know the characters before you paint them. But yeah, I still read, you know, every day. I have this Marvel app that I have where it has all the comics. It's like Netflix, but for comics. So yeah, you should read an issue a day just to kind of keep up and be inspired for what to paint next.
So I'm not going to nerd out too much with you right now, right? Because I do have a question from, because I'm into the new Thor series. I've been into the old Thor series, and now he's the Herald and all this stuff. And we're going to probably lose some people as we start geeking out on some things. Love the Captain America series and those Alex Ross covers and where they're taking that. And then I got into Empire. I don't know if you're reading Empire right now.
I haven't started Empire yet.
I'm telling you, dude, you gotta get into that. Yes, it is. It's very good. So we have a question from the audience, and it's, what is your favorite hero to draw? What's your favorite superhero? Like to draw, paint, whatever.
Spider-Man. Actually, let me show you something cool. So I pulled out my sketchbook. Always have a sketchbook with me. Always draw, you know, people that I'm around. It's like a personal diary kind of thing.
Yeah, you can keep flipping through pages and showing us. Like, don't be shy.
This was the day I met Stan Lee.
Shut up.
I drew this, and then he signed it for me.
Shut up. First of all,
cool.
That's a killer Spider-Man. Second of all, he signed it for you.
He signed it. How cool is that?
It's we turned it up to 11.
But yeah, Spider-Man's always the funnest to draw. The most difficult to draw is Iron Man, because, you know, he's all metal and he's got to be symmetrical, and then the metal reflects, you know, so it's always a challenge doing Iron Man. I think the funnest to draw, though, actually is I think Groot, because he's all actually both. Adult Groot, because all the textures and everything, but then Baby Groot's so cute, so you can't go wrong with Baby Groot.
No, you can't. And I think you've got a mini. We've got a mini on chuckjonescatalog.com/Marvel, and we've got a mini. It's a 10x12. Yeah, and
that's probably very close to sold out. So there's not too many left, I'm sure, of that one.
Yeah, my wife has already said you need to like tag that. And that has to make it to our collection. So I've got I probably painted about 50 Baby Groots when that film came out. Get it? Yes.
He took over the world.
Oh, dude, you can't go wrong with that and a Baby Yoda, which I can't say anything. But you're painting for Red Dot, forget it. Like, there was some stuff happening. All right, so I've got two viewer questions. And if you look back over all the artists over the past 40 years or so who have drawn for Marvel, so think like Ditko, Ramita, you know, like you could go down the list, Jim Lee, you name it, right? Which of them or Jack Kirby, you know, right? So which of them may have inspired you the most artistically? That's the first question. I'll let you answer that one.
My absolute favorite comic artist, hands down, is Mike Mignola. I learned about him with Atlantis. He was the head designer for Atlantis, the Disney film. And that's when I learned about Hellboy. And then I've read his whole catalog, and he's like the Picasso of comic books in a way. And he's still drawing amazing stuff every day. So he's my absolute favorite. But when I do like anatomy lessons, I love David Finch and Jim Lee and all those guys.
Hands down, David Finch, yes.
I learned a lot about how to draw, you know, really powerful poses and things like that just from those artists. But as for style, Mike Mignola, you can't go wrong. He's
No,
the
you
man.
cannot. So to follow up that question, as I follow up the question, Scott says that the Stan Lee tribute, enough said, is available. So it like stunning piece and available. Do you remember a specific first comic experience or character that really made things click for you?
Ooh, I think the power of story is probably it's between the Dark Knight Returns, you know, this like old retired Batman coming back to fight crime. That really kind of changed like how amazing comic books can be. And then the Watchmen by Alan Moore. It's kind of hard to top that. Yeah. But I love the Marvels by Alex Ross is unbelievable. I mean, every single panel is a piece of fine art. You know, that it blew my mind. Yeah, there's just, gosh, there's so many. It's like trying to pick your favorite movie. It's impossible.
Right?
There's so many good ones.
Just a little sprinkling here and there.
Yeah.
As you, so what I love too is I get excited about like sketchbooks and process and I have a healthy appreciation for what goes on behind that, right? And then as Scott, if you can go ahead and show that image catalog that we have up right now, go ahead and pop that on screen so that people can see what we have over at chuckjonescatalog.com/Marvel. When you're learning poses, like how much time do you put in to just learning the craft, those fundamentals?
Oh, forever. Some pieces are easier than others, but like for Enough Said, you just got to put in the time. You know, it takes a lot of drawing. Each character is built differently, and it takes a lot of time. That's why I do a lot of portraits usually, because it's, you know, it's just a portrait, makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, doing a full figure, you got to put in the time, and yeah, sometimes you have to take pictures of yourself making that pose.
Yes.
Which is I will not embarrass myself with those pictures, but yeah, I mean, you just got to put in the time and, you know, get reference if you can, you know, photograph someone that maybe looks the same, you know, size wise, and just make it work.
Well, and you know what I find funny about that, and funny in a great way, is, you know, like we brought up Alex Ross, and I did watch his documentary last night.
Me too.
Did you? Freaking brilliant, man. And I'll tell you a little caveat. Alex Ross and his family were in my studio with good friends.
No way.
Yeah, dude. And he hanging out, drawing. And it was just a handful of us. We did a Saturday morning drawing thing. Couldn't have been nicer people. And
it's amazing.
With some friends. And dude, so I'm asking this, and I'm like, why gouache? I'm like, I get it, you know, in a way, but like gouache. And then how are you? Do you really shoot all your own reference stuff? And man, that guy shoots all, and he's like, I'm telling you, shoot your own reference. He goes, it doesn't matter how fit or how unfit you think you are, or just get the poses down. And so I agree with you. Like that is, and by the way, people should go watch that document after this show, and they've purchased some artwork. Definitely watch the Alex Ross documentary. But you know, when you're shooting your own reference and you're trying to figure out some pieces, so like the Black Widow piece, you know, are you like, you're talking to your wife and you're like, look, man, I just need to shoot some pictures. Just go with it.
Actually, it's my 12-year-old daughter. I had her jump up.
There you go.
And you know, it's also about the lighting too. You want to see how the light, you know, reflects on the muscles and around the face, and I mean, that stuff's hard to make up. So you try to do the best you can, and then you know, make it up as you go along.
So will you indulge me? Will you indulge me just a hair? And do you have an overhead cam, or is it right now you just got front facing?
Oh yeah, I just have it's on my iPad. So it's attached to a stand.
No, that's fine. So could you indulge me and just crack that sketchbook one more time and maybe run through a few things, because I've gotten to see a little bit of this, like when you've been around.
This is let's see. Here's like a drawing when I was in Italy. Statues and people around.
And I think you and Ari share an Italy kind of connection, because Ari, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of your favorite cities, art-wise and everything, that's awesome, man.
Florence. For me, it's Florence. Is my favorite city art-wise.
Here's my daughter dancing in front of a jazz band on Disney Cruise Line. Good times.
Wow.
Is that an art auction? They're auctioning a painting.
No way.
I just draw whatever's in front of me, you know.
Well, and so there's a Chuck.
Oh, this is
Go ahead.
This is cool. This is I did a signing with Richard Sherman. He wrote all the music for Disney.
No
So
way.
I did Feed the Birds, and then he signed it for me as well.
Shut up. That's a golden sketchbook. Stanley, Richard. Who else is signed in there?
I know. This is a keepsake. And then you got my daughter, you know, she draws stuff too.
Yeah, they need their pages, man. So
Yeah.
I love that
Mr. Disney.
aspect of, oh, come on. Yeah, like your sketchbook should just be a book that you should put out.
I've got about 20 of them, so I should probably scan them and publish some books.
I'm just saying
That's a good idea.
I would be the first to buy the first edition of the Tim Rogerson sketchbook. Man, I lost my question too, because it was a fairly decent one to follow up on that.
Ben, I can help you. Let me help you.
Yeah.
I want to just shine a little light here. So I'm going to do the my sketchbook. So here's my sketchbook number one, and then here's my older daughter here.
Yes, I love the
Since we've been focused, I've done. This is Tim Rogerson, actually.
Yeah, baseball.
Yeah.
Go Yankees.
But I do want to mention something. My sketches don't nearly come close, obviously, but I had to just quickly skip away for a moment earlier, and we were talking about Enough Said. And as a publisher, I just want to kind of go back for a moment and shed a bit of light on that. It was a fascinating journey that Tim and I went through. First was, who can we choose that would do justice to Stan Lee's legacy as the creator of this universe of characters that we all care about and we love? And then once I was like, all right, most assuredly, Tim could do a great job on this. What we didn't realize was that Stan's likeness, which we wanted to include, we had to get dual licensing. So actually, Stan's likeness belongs to this other company called POW Entertainment. And we had to make sure that not only did Marvel approve of the imagery and an image that paid homage to the most important person in the Marvel universe, which is Stan, we also had to make sure that it was approved by POW Entertainment. And so the silhouette, which is on the paper of Stan's typewriter, and the painting is true to Stan's typewriter where he typed a majority of the classic stories. All of that had to come together. It took us almost a year just to kind of put that all together. And Tim was the one that put it together creatively. So, and then we finally got it approved. So I just want to mention, I apologize for missing that moment before, but it's a very special item, that Enough Said. And of course, as we all know, Stan almost always ended his comments with either Excelsior or Enough Said. And so we thought a piece that pays tribute to Stan should just be called Enough Said, because that says it all.
Well,
Let me show that image again.
Yeah, I love that.
And Tim painstakingly put together that typewriter, that from photos of Stan's actual typewriter.
That's
there
nuts.
it is.
And one more time. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's Stan. You guys know the shadow.
Love it.
And then that's Stan's actual typewriter that he used. The old Remington.
Copy of Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the first appearance of Spidey underneath it.
There's so
I love the idea of Stan putting his glasses down, like he's done.
Yes.
His glasses are down, and now he's moved on.
Well, and I love the reflection too, and how it all, that first start with what he did in Spider-Man. So I know that I've got to wrap it up here, even though I don't want to, but I have to. And real quick, for someone had asked about the Alex Ross documentary, just you search San Diego Comic-Con at home or go to alexross.com. I think they've got his documentary on there. So the final question being, and Ari, you may know the answer to this question. Tim, you can throw your guess in. I'm going to throw my guess in. Strongest metal, adamantium or vibranium?
I know the answer from the creator.
So that's what I want to hear.
The answer from the creator, and I specifically asked this question, was, I don't know, Ari. It just depended on how I felt that way about the story.
So maybe Wolverine wins, maybe Cap wins, or Black Panther. Who knows? It's just how he felt about it at the moment.
And the genius was, it could change in the next comic.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, hey,
True
you know,
story.
I can't thank you guys enough. Ari, this is my first time meeting you. You couldn't have been a more pleasurable individual to talk with. I know Craig has a long history and speaks very highly of you, and I think very highly of Craig. So that just kind of doubles over. Tim, I do know you personally, and
It's good to see you again.
You're good to see you too, buddy. And I will double down on what Ari said about you. You know, something about, you know, just even getting to know the artist when you get to know them and how much that attaches yourself to that person or their art. But really, just as a human being, it's a pleasure to know you, because I have such respect for you as a family man, you, your wife, and your daughter, how you make all of this stuff work, the passion that you pour into things. You're not only doing what you love doing, but you're taking care of what's most important first. And I love you for that, man, because it's inspirational to anybody. So
thanks so much, man.
My pleasure, man. So I look forward to seeing you again, sir, on screen or in person, hopefully in person.
Yes.
And
hopefully
Ari,
soon.
Yeah, Ari, thank you so much. Again, it's chuckjonescatalog.com/Marvel with a whole bunch of stuff. Tim will sketch, and you will get an original. You will get like something like that on 12F animation paper. I will geek out because I know Craig's getting one, and it's going to be my turn. So thank you so much, everybody, for this Comic-Con Creative Side chat with the legend Tim Rogerson and the legend Ari Goldman. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely.